This is the second part of the story. If you want to watch the first part, you can see the link in the description. Enjoy. I turned in a circle, realizing the futility of trying to escape. I ran my hands through my hair and kept them on my head as she approached. All I could do was watch her approach. I could only stare at her, helpless, pathetic in my pain. What? She asked to explain my silence. I just wanted to see if you had any idea how beautiful you were. I said sadly, and I wanted to know how the hell I was going to get over you. You don't have to, she replied quietly. Yes, I really do, I said. And it's going to take a while, Stacy, but I'll be fine in the end. Please don't do this, she pleaded. I live that scene every day, Troy. I don't know why I did what I did. I panicked and ran away. For God's sake, Troy, I was only 21 years old, and I felt trapped. She grabbed my hands to keep me from leaving. When I came to you for our first date, you knew about my history with David, she said. You knew that, and you pursued me anyway. How are you different from David? I never lied to you. I always told you I cared about him. Every damn time you ask me why I was with him when he treated me like that. Don't you remember, Troy? I told you I was with him because I loved him. I told you that every damn time. But you still came back to me, and every time you looked at me, the way your eyes lit up when I was around you, Troy. Do you have any idea how that made me feel? You treated me like a queen, and I realized I was falling in love with you. I hated the way David treated me, but I was conflicted. You spent every second you could with me. You'd come over and help me do my homework, wash my car, or just hang around. You spent time with my father to be on his good side. I wish I had $1 for every chess game I saw you lose to him or listen to him talk about his business. David kept cheating on me, and the next thing I knew, I was cheating on him with you. You kept asking me out, and I started to accept that we were a couple and David was a thing of the past. But it still pissed me off that he was seeing other girls. One of the reasons David and I were having problems was that he constantly wanted my cherry. When I kept resisting, he threw me down to be eaten by girls who were dropping their panties. I was furious about that. You never gave me ultimatums, and I was able to relax knowing I could go at my own pace, and I fell in love with you. Of course we didn't have sex. We just kissed a lot. But if you'd put any pressure on me at all, we would have, and you knew it. But you also knew that I wanted it to mean something when I wore white to my wedding. But always in the back of my mind, I couldn't understand why David let me go. Why didn't he fight for me? How could he let me go to you? Back then, you and I were in college, and our lives were scheduled. How were we going to get married and have kids? But while you continued to focus, I was still caught up in my own questions. And unbeknownst to you, David came to me and asked me to take him back. And I was trapped between the two of you. On the one hand, I had Mr. Serious, hard-working, reliable, and loyal to me. On the other, Mr. Fun, dangerous, carefree, and unreliable. I know it sounds like a cliche, but you two made me feel complete. When we had that night, I panicked and ran and hurt you that I shouldn't have hurt you. I was so ashamed of what I had done that I kept running. I ran to Europe. I ran to California after I got married because my father banished me. It didn't change anything, Troy. No matter where I ran, you were still in my thoughts. So I decided to come home and meet you face to face. I owe you a debt of gratitude. My life is not going the way I wanted it to. I hate my life with David. I hate that he never stopped cheating on me, Troy. But it's not like in high school when he cheated on me like he always did. I had you to make me feel better then. And now he's cheating on me and I'm all alone, Troy. The reality is that I belong to you. I made a bad mistake and I'm going to take care of it, Troy. Yes, but there is one big difference between our realities, Stacy. The day after you ruined me, you were still with David. And the next day. And the next. You didn't come back to me. I'm still trapped in a hell I didn't choose. I wake up every day knowing that the woman I love is with another man. Don't you understand, Stacy? You made your choice, and the subsequent circumstances will never allow us to be together. So please let me go. My heartbreaking, pitiful plea brought unshed tears to her eyes. I pulled apart her embrace. I'm just going to leave, Stacy. Tonight was a mistake, just another big mistake. Where she got the strength from, I have no idea. But she grabbed my wrist and pressed my palm against her tit with force. She looked up at me and said, "Now try to get away." She kept pressing my hand against hers, and God help me. I began to squeeze it gently, and then I moved toward her and began to kiss her. She nestled into my arms in agreement. I immediately took in her familiar body, yet so different after 6 years of change. I tried to trace her new form clad in a dress. She moved her foot toward mine to prolong the contact. I immediately stiffened to the discomfort of my pants. "Please, Stacy, stop this now," I gasped between kisses. She kept throwing herself at me, and I kept fighting myself. The most telling thing was that I didn't fight her off. I didn't reject her. I met every moment of her passion with my own. She lifted one foot off the ground and rubbed against me. In response, she sat on top of me while I held her in my arms. Slowly, she lowered her pelvis to the ground, pressing herself into me. "Stacy, I can't. If I do this, I'll be no better than David. I don't have much left, but my conscience won't let me do it. If your marriage is so terrible, leave him. Divorce him and find someone who will make you happy. There is too much history between us to overcome, too much animosity and bad blood for us to overcome. Your father will destroy me or I will destroy him. There is no other way. I'm tired of you hurting me, Stacy. You have to realize that I will always love you. All this time, all this pain, all my pretend hatred for you. It's killing me, Stacy. I'll never forget you, but I need there to be an end between us. I need to be able to consider you my friend, despite what's about to happen. If we continue tonight, I promise you that you will hate me, or I will hate you for the rest of our lives." My explanation was the catalyst for her tears as we continued to hug each other, right in front of David Porter. As soon as I moved away from Stacy, he delivered a punch to my jaw. I fell back down on the seat of my pants, disoriented by the blow. In a daze, I watched Stacy stop David from finishing me off with his legs, and I sat up, trying to clear my brain. Fortunately for me, David was followed outside by several of his henchmen, including Fred Carter, who watched me with a chuckle. The rest of the group joined Stacy to physically restrain him from maiming or killing me. David continued to yell at me, threatening me with death when he was finally dragged away. I continued to sit on the ground as the nausea and dizziness gradually passed. I groaned when I was finally able to stand up. Once again, I had a ridiculous thought. No one would forget this 10th reunion. I limped home literally and figuratively, all the while fighting to keep the contents of my stomach from revolting against me. Staggering up the stairs and limping, I walked to the refrigerator. I scooped some ice into a rag and applied it to the sorest spot. Physical pain. Nothing helped with the heartstrings that had just been torn. Something strange was happening to my body. I found it hard to make my body follow the commands my brain was giving me. I felt something wet and damp running down my neck. I finally managed to bring my hand up to it, and with my vision slightly unfocused, I saw blood on my fingers. After what seemed like an eternity, I was able to dial 911 on my phone's speed dial and, gasping, told them of my predicament. Fearing that I had a concussion from David's blows, I decided to try to stay awake until the ambulance arrived. When they arrived and took me to the emergency room, I had already lost consciousness. The medical staff fussed around explaining my symptoms and how I was in this condition. I just told them that someone had a fight with me and left it at that. The consensus was that I had a concussion aggravated by damage to my inner ear which should go away without complications. I ended up being kept overnight to monitor my condition should it change. Early the next morning, a couple of visitors came to see me. The chief of police of Camden, along with the captain of detectives, came into my room. When I saw them, I thought they were going to interrogate me to find out who had beaten me up. So I was already mentally prepared for that scenario when they started laying out the cards. Their concern was not who I had gotten into a fight with, but how I could explain my whereabouts after the fight. Specifically, when I called 911 and whether anyone was with me before the ambulance arrived. I advised them to contact the ambulance service and the hospital to satisfy their curiosity about my timeline. If they had any other questions, they could contact my attorney, I informed them. Both men left with frowning faces. In a normal situation, I would have gladly agreed to help the police, but the hostile attitude made my radar wary. Within an hour, I found out why. News had traveled around the hospital that Stacy Porter was being cared for in the emergency room and had been assigned a bed in the intensive care unit. She had been beaten to a pulp by an unknown assailant and was in a coma from her injuries and the medication she was being treated with. My attempts to see her were easily thwarted by the medical staff, and I felt frustrated that I couldn't figure out what had happened. No doubt my attempts to see her would have added to the rumor mills. My hospital stay was extended a couple more days because the attending physician wanted to make sure I didn't have any extenuating circumstances related to the concussion. There were only two circumstances that I was aware of. First of all, I hadn't heard a word from Janet, my bride-to-be, all weekend. I could only assume that she had heard about the spectacle at the country club and was angry with me. Secondly, I had the misfortune to see David Porter as a visitor. Turning, I saw him standing in the doorway of my room. A gloating grin indicated that he was thinking about my predicament. I continued to stare at him, savoring the results of my sneak attack. David, I can understand why you decided to fight with me, but why would you want to do that to Stacy? I asked. The grin grew even wider as he replied, Do what? I have no idea what you're talking about. The only one with the motive to harm Stacy is you, David. What are you going to do when Charles Bachman decides to intervene? Don't worry about it, Troy. He and I have an agreement, and the police have already gotten their orders. The perpetrator of the attack on Stacy is some unknown person. When Stacy recovers, she will be sent back to California to live with her sister. Charles Bachman and I will continue to do our usual business of running you out of town like a beaten dog. I shook my head sadly. Charles Bachman hates me that much? He let you beat up his daughter and try to blame it on me? He can't stand what you walk on. You constantly humiliate his family. What you and Stacy did at the school reunion was just icing on the cake. He fully approved of my measures to punish Stacy. David, I can almost understand why he hates me. But what have I done to you that you hate me to this extent? My question startled David. For a brief second, the anger in his eyes was replaced by a sense of doubt as he searched for an answer. Mr. Stacy is better than you. Mister, I think I'm better than everyone else, he replied stiffly. Did you think I was going to let you get away with stealing Stacy from me? You didn't allow anything, I quickly interjected. You dumped her and I came up to you and told you I intended to ask her out. You didn't object. And you know what, asshole? I changed my mind and decided I wanted her and I snuck into her pants every chance I got. And she still wouldn't let me, saying she was saving it for you. Hell, even when we went to Europe after she ran away from you, all she did was mope and cry for you. She still didn't want to sleep with me. I was so angry. Then we flew back to the city and her father read her the riot act and told her she had to marry me because he wouldn't tolerate any more scandals from her. So we played the wedding under the gun, and she cried like a baby when I finally slept with her on our honeymoon. So I go off and have fun, and she sits at home and wishes she'd left her poor Troy behind, which is fine with me. Because when you're finally on the street, She can pick you up, as far as I'm concerned. I'll be running Bachman's Enterprises, and you'll be throwing garbage in the trash can if I can help it. David, I'll tell you once. You're going to have to go a long way to get rid of me, I replied, and don't think you're going to be able to kick my ass. Even after you hit me and kicked me, you didn't hold me back. I was already getting up to fight back when Stacy stopped the fight. I would have killed you, I said it offhandedly. The hint of David's inability to hold me weighed on him as he walked away. I wanted him to dwell on that fact. Somehow the days at the hospital went by unnoticed. Janet was still missing. I kept in touch with Tom Jenkins, who was doing business on my behalf. I was contemplating revealing to him aspects of the bank's affairs that he wasn't privy to when I got word that Stacy wanted to see me. When I entered her room, I shuddered when I saw the extent of her injuries, and my dislike was taken to a new level. How could someone do that to someone they were supposed to love? She invited me to sit by her bedside, and I took her frail hand. I suppose you heard I was banished again, she said weakly. I heard. I'm sorry, Troy. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. I guess that's the best I can do. She started crying. Sure, Stacy. It's not your fault. You need to get away. Get away from this because no matter how it ends, you're going to be hurt. Go to California. Start over. Find someone you can love and leave me and David and your father in the past. Don't look back, I commanded. I have someone I love here, she insisted, squeezing my hand tightly. I took my hand away. Will you love me if I destroy your father, Stacy? Because I intend to do it if I can. Can you bear the thought of being known in this town as the woman who betrayed her own father? I can't put you through that, Stacy. Remember the anecdote I told in my office? You mean the one where you hinted that I was a slut? She asked. You're not the whore, Stacy. It's me. You've submitted an offer worth millions of dollars. And I'm so eager to chase you that I'm willing to settle for your reputation being worth $5 in the end. I can't hurt you like that. You're too dangerous for me, Stacy. Go away and live in peace. I walked away, hearing the sobs echoing in the room. The day I was released, I went to the bank and thanked Tom Jenkins for his guidance in my absence. Janet's desk had been cleaned out, and her copy of the secret bank books was gone too. That evening, while I was in the attic of my apartment, I heard familiar footsteps approaching me. Hi, Janet, I said, not bothering to make sure it was her. I just stopped by to return your key, she replied. Okay, I replied neutrally. I waited. Mr. Buckman wants to meet you tomorrow night at the country club to discuss business with you, she informed me. Okay, I replied again. She waited for me to ask the questions I should have asked. For example, how she knew Charles Buckman and why he had chosen her to be his envoy. I was not inclined to oblige her. At last, she left. I pulled into the parking lot of the country club, turned off the ignition, and just sat in my car. I paid no attention to the few passers-by who approached my car as they entered or exited the building. Gathering all the strength and energy I would need to see the meeting through, I began a series of deep breaths. Finally, I left my old beat-up Chevy among the immaculate Cadillacs, Lexuses, and Mercedes, and walked to the entrance. The receptionist occupying the entrance was preparing for me to go through the hassle of announcing my name and the purpose of my visit, and then wait for an escort since I was not supposed to walk down the corridor alone. I walked past her as if she was invisible and paid no attention to her shocked face and protests as they subsided, and I continued down the hallway. Civility was not a priority in my current frame of mind. I wouldn't waste my energy on my subordinates today. As if out of thin air, Thomas Clark, the manager of the country club, appeared in front of me and kept pace with me. Good evening, Mr. Harrison. How nice to see you here again, he said cordially. I glanced at him. Thomas Clark was one of the few protesters who had opposed my family's expulsion from the country club. It was because of his talent for keeping an eye on the country club that he hadn't lost his job during the general unrest when Charles Bachman waged war against my family. Good evening, Mr. Clark. It's good to see you too. Despite my intentions, I felt it my duty to express my appreciation for his efforts. He nodded and my companion and I continued down the corridor without a word. Mr. Bachman has reserved an office for your meeting today, he reminded me. We approached the office, and he seemed to want to say something else to me. I slowed down to give him that opportunity. With a concerned expression on his face, he began, Mr. Harry Troy, if there's anything I can do for you after tonight. I was touched by his generosity. Thank you, Thomas. That means a lot to me, I assured him, and we walked into the office. The atmosphere of the country club office reflected old school male domination in the best possible way. It wasn't that women were forbidden to be in the room. It was just that due to history and heritage, they were not allowed to occupy it. In the large room, hunting trophies of various wild animals hung on the walls. On the walls hung photographs of various expeditions. I had a fleeting desire to see if any of these photos included the ones my father traveled to, or whether, in imitation of Stalinist Russia, he had been declared banned and the offending photos removed. The faint aroma of expensive cigars competed with the hickory and oak logs blazing in the huge stone fireplace. Light and shadows danced on the soft leather armchairs and sofas. The gleam of polished mahogany furniture, several of which were topped with Waterford crystal decanters filled with various whiskies or liqueurs waiting to be consumed. Shelves littered with rare first editions of literary masterpieces, many autographed by the authors. In the corner stood a large globe testifying to its antiquity with unexplored parts of the world, names of forgotten countries and shifting boundaries. And in the very center of the room, confidently dominating his universe, stood my nemesis Charles Bachman. His son-in-law, my former friend David Porter, hovered nearby, serving as a companion. He stared at me, hesitant to attack. He stared at his father-in-law, desperately waiting for the signal to destroy me. I watched the enormous figure of Charles Bachman, remembering how he had bullied me years ago when I was courting Stacy. All the little derogatory remarks and jokes I'd endured while studying the chessboard during one of the games he'd insisted on playing while I waited for Stacy to get ready for her date. The inevitable gloating as he captured my king and pronounced checkmate, signifying another of my defeats. Troy Evans Williams, he said, as if giving me a death sentence. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Not long enough, Mr. Bachman, I replied. You wanted to meet me, Mr. Bachman, so tell me why I'm here so I can leave here and go home. Why don't we get a drink, Troy? He called up the country club manager and asked him to go to the storage room and bring back a decanter of Remy Martin Louis III estate rare cask that the manager was storing for him. I'm impressed, Mr. Bachman. How much does a bottle cost now? Last time I bought one of them, Troy, and it cost me about $25,000. If I remember correctly, Mr. Bachman, the only time you raise a toast is when you make a business deal. That's right, Troy. I made a very big business deal, and I feel like celebrating. Do you mind if I ask what you bought? Not at all, Troy, he commented, taking the decanter from the manager. Thomas Clark left the room while Charles Bachman poured healthy portions into 3 decanters of brandy and held one out to me. I've just bought up the Camden Bank and Trust. He looked at me with his soulless eyes, waiting for my reaction. Strange, I don't remember agreeing to sell it, I said calmly. David followed, picked up a third decanter of brandy and gave me a look of pure schadenfreude. You're going to have to sell, Troy. On Monday, the state bank auditor will audit your bank. Copies of the real ledgers you've been hiding from everyone will be presented for inspection. After they compare them to the fake books you've been fooling everyone with, the investigation will begin.